Good morning, everybody. Today I'll be teaching you lesson number 4, Wind Song, found on page number 44. Let's begin by studying about some of the extraordinary things about birds. Look at the video that you see. The bird that you see is a hummingbird. This bird is the smallest bird in the world. When it flaps its wings, they say it takes around 20 to 70 times for it in a second. It moves its wings around 20 to 70 times in 1 second. Another thing about this bird is it can balance itself in the air without any support, just like a helicopter. This is the only bird in the world that can fly backwards and upside down too. Isn't that really lovely about a hummingbird? Now look at this owl. The most amazing thing about the owl is that it can rotate its head around 270 degrees either from the left hand side or from the right hand side. It can see all around by just sitting in one direction. When you talk about its eyesight, they're saying it cannot see very far, but then it has got a very good sense of hearing. It can hear very well. Most of its work is done only by hearing, not by its seeing. Now, when it goes to catch its prey, that is when it is going in search of food, only by listening it can find out how far that food that it is searching for is, how high it is, and it can calculate the distance just from the sound of it and immediately go and catch its prey. That's all you have about the owl. Now, when it comes to ravens, you must have seen ravens. Ravens are black crows. Now, these black crows, very often we do not hear much about a black crow. But to tell you, a black crow is better than a parrot when it comes to doing mimicry. When you say mimicry, it is imitating something done by somebody else. Now, if I tell you to make the sound of a dog bark, you will do it. Like that, you have this raven. It is better than a parrot. You're saying it can make the sound of a car engine. Suppose it is living in the forest, it can make the sounds of different kinds of birds. It can make the sounds of a deer. It can make the sound of a monkey. And you will really get confused because it is so beautiful when it makes its mimicking sound. I'm sure you must have heard of different other birds and their characteristics. I've just put two other birds and their characteristics. Just observe the video. You will enjoy looking at these birds, how well they behave. Really extraordinary. Now, why have I shown you all these birds? The reason why I have shown you all these birds is today's lesson we are going to talk about a canary bird, a bird that listens to the sound of the wind and sings. So today's lesson is written by Annie Carroll Moore. She's an American writer, and she demanded that children be treated and respected and as separate individuals. And they said that she won the Regina medal for her work in the children's library services. Now let us begin by reading the lesson. I will read each paragraph and explain to you. Let's begin from page number 45. It was a hot and dry day. The wind howled in the plains. Rachel sat on the bed, hand stitching a quilt. She had just finished when the door swung open and her father came in. So they are telling us that it was a hot and dry day, means it must be a summer day. The wind howled in the plains. Wind howled means the wind was blowing. And when you say plains, it is a land that is very flat with a few trees around. This girl, Rachel, she sat on the bed and she was stitching a quilt. When you say a quilt, it's like what you call a kaudi. A kaudi is something that you cover yourself which is thick enough. She was doing some embroidery on that quilt and she was sitting on the bed and doing it. She had just finished when the door swung open and her father came in. She finished stitching that quilt and suddenly her father came in from somewhere out. Hot day out there, he said, wiping his forehead. So when he says hot day out there, it means it was very hot. He wiped his forehead. Why do you wipe your forehead? Because he was sweating. Rachel ran to him and proudly showed him her masterpiece. It was a cheerful quilt with neat stitches outlining the colorful squares. Now then they said, as soon as Rachel saw her father coming in, she ran to her father and showed what she had done. What she had done? She had done the stitching of a quilt. And you know what a quilt is? You'll find patches and patches of different colors of cloth and then stitches made on it. So you would find that beautifully she made color patches of squares and she stitched on it. That's a mighty fine piece of work, he nodded. Let us go into town this Saturday. You can show off your quilt. I've got a sack of onions ready to take to the market. So they're telling us that the father appreciated the work that she did. When you say a fine piece of work means something that somebody who is very good at it would have done. Something you can appreciate. When you say a piece of work is something that can be appreciated or admired. So the father said, you really did a good job. And he tells her, I'm going to the market because I got a whole bag of onions. The father got one bag of onions to sell in the market. Maybe he is a farmer. So he says, I got a whole bag of onions in the market. So on Saturday, you and I will go out. You can show your quilt and I will sell my onions in the market. On Saturday, the family excitedly drove to the nearest town, 20 miles away, and stopped at the general store. So he said it was Saturday. The whole family, that is in the family, you had the mother, the father, and Rachel and her sister and another brother. All of them sat in the vehicle and they went to the town. The town was 20 miles away from their home. And they went to the general store so that they can sell their products. While her brother and sister explored the store and her parents spoke to the grocer, Rachel wandered to the doorway to look at a bright yellow bird in a cage. So the writer says, Rachel's brother and sister went into the store and they were just looking at everything. Explored means they were exploring. They were just finding out things. You know, when children go to the store, they just want to see what are the things being sold there. So the brother and sister of Rachel were just moving around in the general store. And Rachel's mummy and daddy, they went to speak to the grocer. Now a grocer is a person who sells food products. Like they wanted to sell the onion, so they went to speak to the owner of that store. But Rachel, what she did? Rachel wandered to the doorway to look at a bright yellow bird in a cage. But Rachel, what she did? She was attracted towards a yellow bird. That bird was in the cage. She went to that bird. It hopped from perch to perch, rarely standing still. So he said, when she looked at the bird was just hopped from perch to perch, means from branch to branch. You could find that the bird was jumping around, moving around. You know, a bird keeps moving from one place and not from one place to another and not standing in one particular place. So she was looking at the bird, jumping from branch to branch. A man who had stopped by was also watching the bird intently. So he said, as Rachel was looking at the bird, another man was walking on the road. He also stood and looked at the bird intently. Intently means carefully. He looked at the bird very carefully. It listens to the wind, he told Rachel before walking away. He looked at the bird, then he told Rachel, this bird, no, it listens to the wind. That means it listens to how the wind blows. He's trying to tell Rachel about the canary bird. Her parents appeared a moment later. Her parents appear a moment later means after some time her parents could be seen. At the same time, the little bird lifted its head, swelled its chest, and sang out a joyous trill. Rachel saw her mother's face light up with delight. So he said, her parents came and saw Rachel standing at the cage. At that time, they're saying, this bird, it lifted its head up and made its chest broad, swelled this to make it bulged a little bit, and then sang a song. You could hear the music of the bird. The bird started singing. As soon as Rachel's mother saw that, her face was so happy. You could look, they saying her face lit up. Lit up is it became bright, filled with happiness. With delight means with happiness. Quietly, Rachel traded her beautiful quilt for the bird. Slowly, Rachel went to the grocer, to the man who was selling that bird, and she told the man, the grocer, you take my quilt and please give that bird which is in the cage. So she traded it. That means she sold as an exchange. She gave her quilt and she took the bird from the grocer. Back home, the little canary entertained them endlessly. So they said when they took the bird home, this bird is called a canary bird. As soon as they took it home, they said the whole family, it sang so much that the family was entertained. They called him Sir Gallant because he battled with the wind. So they said they gave this bird a name. What's the name they gave it? Sir Gallant. Now, a gallant is a brave soldier or a knight who fights in a battle. So the bird was fighting with the wind. So they named him as Sir Gallant. The louder the wind, the more loudly he sang. So every time the wind blew loudly, this bird sang louder than the wind. So it was like a battle between the canary bird and the wind, and that is why they gave the bird the name as Sir Gallant. The competition was so fierce that sometimes everyone burst out laughing. So they're saying the competition between the bird and the wind, you would find it was so strong. When you say fierce, it was so strong that the wind would blow, the bird would sing louder. The wind would blow louder, the bird would sing louder. So sometimes the whole family looked at that and started laughing. Burst out laughing means they laughed loudly looking at the wind and the bird competing with each other. Sir Gallant lifted their spirits, turning dusty days into shiny days. So when they say Sir Gallant lifted their spirits means sometimes they're saying when the family was sad and this bird sang, they're saying it turned dusty days into sunshine days. That means it turned sad days into happy days. Rachel often thought about what the man in the store had said. She had heard the wind, but unlike the canary, she had never listened to it herself. So she's saying, Rachel was thinking, that man told me that the canary bird listens to the wind. But then she thought, the bird can hear the sound of the wind. But till today, I have not listened to how really the wind sounds. Or to the sound of the wind, I have not listened even till today. Now, when she tried hard, she could hear music in the wind. So she says, now, when after the man said that, and then after she looked at the canary bird listening to the wind, from that day onwards, she started listening to the wind and she felt it was like music, as though she could hear some music that was blowing in the wind. The music was faint and hidden in the background, and she needed her imagination. So she's saying when she sat and listened to the wind, you could hear the music which was faint. Faint means which was slightly heard. And it was like hiding from somewhere else. You could hear the music like that it was. It was an imagination. She felt it like it was an imagination. But it was there if she truly listened. So she says, really, if you sit and listen, you can hear that music. It is not something you are imagining. She began humming the sounds she heard, and slowly, as she listened to the music in the wind, she started singing it. Humming is to make that sound of singing. Slowly, without any words, you just make a tune out of it. That's a pretty tune, her mother commented one day. What song is that? One day, when Rachel was sitting and listening to the music of the wind, she started making the sound of how the wind is blowing. And from the other side, her mother listened to her and said, Rachel, you're singing such a beautiful tune. She did not know that Rachel was listening to the sound of the wind. Rachel didn't reply, unsure how to explain, and her mother did not press the question. Soon she too began humming. So they said, Rachel said, I did not know how to explain it to my mother that the wind also is making the music. So mother could not get an explanation but did not press the question. When you say press the question, she did not ask for an explanation where this girl is getting the tune from. Slowly, even the mother learned to hum and she also learned to sing like Rachel. One afternoon, Rachel noticed the canary sitting motionless on his perch. Is Sir Gallant sick? She asked in alarm. So one day, what happened? Rachel was sitting, and then she suddenly saw this bird was not shaking, was not jumping from branch to branch. And then she asked her mother, Mummy, is this bird not well? She got frightened because the bird is sitting so quietly. No, it's just a dark day outside, her mother reassured her. So the mother said, No, no, it is fine because outside it is dark, no? Maybe the spirit of the bird is also down. That is why it is quiet and silent and not shaking. It'll be raining soon and he probably doesn't feel like singing. So the mother said, Outside it is dark, it may be going to begin to rain. So maybe because of that, the bird doesn't like to sing. But Rachel knew that something was wrong. While Sir Gallant stopped singing from time to time, he had always hopped about his cage. She went to the door and looked outside. It was very quiet, no wind or sounds of birds or prairie dogs. She saw black thunder clouds stacked high into the sky. There was a heaviness to the air and a prickly feeling. So she's explaining this part. Rachel, when she looked at the bird not moving at all, she felt really there's something wrong. It is not that the bird is not in mood to sing, but something is really wrong. So uh, she went and she looked outside. She went outside the door and she looked. She could not hear the sound of any wind. She could not hear the sound of any birds. She could not hear the sound of prairie dogs. Prairie dogs, I'll put a picture of a prairie dog. Look at that. It's not exactly a dog, it looks like a rat. She couldn't hear any sounds. Instead of that, she looked at the sky and she found black clouds. Like heavy rain is going to come, thick black clouds in the sky. And then she said, she felt like something is going to happen. Something bad is going to happen. So she said, she felt a kind of feeling inside that something really bad is going to happen. The man's words echoed in Rachel's mind. It listens to the wind. So at that time, Rachel thought that man said, no, this canary bird listens to the wind. And so she thought about that. Rachel thought about Sir Gallant's odd behavior and the angry thunder clouds and how strange it felt. When she listened carefully, she caught a faint rumble of the thunder. So Rachel thought about Sir Gallant's odd behavior. She said, when I looked at the bird, it was behaving very differently. When she went out and looked at the clouds looked as though it is very, very angry. When she listened very carefully, she could hear slow sounds of thunder. The rumble of a thunder is when the thunder is striking somewhere else and you are on another place and you hear the sound of it, it is light. So they said she could hear the rumble sound of the thunder. Suddenly Rachel knew they were in danger. Mother, she shouted, it's a tornado. So Rachel said, Mommy, there's something very dangerous going to happen. It's going. So she said it must be a tornado. A tornado, if you see, you will find it is like wind blowing with great speed, and it will not blow straight. It will be like circling, like how you say Sundragali. So like that, it will be turning. Okay, it will be turning and twisting. In that, the wind will be so much. There will be storm. There will be wind. There will be rain that is coming, and and the wind will be so much that it can carry anything that comes in its way. So bad it is. So nobody should be out around that time, and it usually happens in countries like America and some of the northern countries where people suffer this tornado, and there's lot of destruction that takes place in a tornado. So Rachel told her mother, I think this tornado is going to come. Immediately the family ran to the cellar at the side of the house. Rachel ran to the fields to warn her father, shouting and waving her arms. So they said when a tornado occurs, when a tornado is going to happen in a particular place, the people in those places, they have an underground built cellar, an underground home, and immediately when they come to know a tornado is coming, all the whole family, they take all the important things and go underground, because when the wind blows it can carry the whole house, but this room that is underground will not be affected at all. So all of them carried their thing including the bird and all went underground. Rachel ran, her father was in the field. Rachel ran and told her father. She started shouting and shaking her hands, waving her hands, shaking her hands because she could not call her father, waving her hands and calling her father. What's wrong? He yelled. So the father asked, what happened? He screamed from there. Yelled is, he screamed. What happened? What happened? Tornado, she shouted. So she said, Papa, there's going to be a tornado. I don't see anything, but I can't bring in the animals. I'll come back to the house with them. No, there's no time. So she told her father, No, I don't. Her father said, No, I don't think there's going to be a tornado. I can't see anything, he says. But then she says, No, no, no. You come, she says. He says, No, I'll bring the animals and come back to the house with them. So she says, You can't bring the animals and then come back to the house because there's no time, any time, this tornado may come. As they ran to the cellar, rain drenched their bodies and a thunderous roaring pounded the air. So, as they were reaching their home and they were going down underground, you could find by the time they reached down, you'll find that it started raining and they became fully wet. When they say cellar, I told you cellars under the underground, an underground room. And then when you say rain drenched, they were fully wet. Their body was wet because of the rain, and a thunderous roaring pounded the air. Then you could hear the sound of thunder, big sound of thunder. So it's called as roaring pounded the air. Roaring is big sound of thunder. The tornado lasted only minutes, although it felt like hours. Now, when this tornado comes, they said it comes only for few minutes, but lot of destruction takes place. So they said, but and then when you look at the destruction, you feel like no that for many hours things happened here, and that's why so much of destruction. When the family finally emerged from their shelter, they were relieved to find their cabin intact. They said after the tornado went away, it crosses and goes off. It blows, the wind blows, and then moves away from that. Few minutes it comes, destroys the whole area, and keeps on moving and destroying whatever places comes on its way. So when the tornado passed away, they came out from underground and they emerges came out, and when they came out and saw their house, they were relieved, they were happy. Why they were happy? Because they thought the tornado will take away their house or destroy their house, but the house was intact. When you say intact, it was just like, it was not at all destroyed, it was perfectly fine. The animals had escaped the tornado, but their fields were destroyed. So he said whenever a tornado occurs, it even carries the cows and throws them off. But this time they're saying the tornado may not have been very huge. That is why the animals were not taken and thrown around. But the fields, they said all their crops were destroyed. When a tornado occurs, the trees are uprooted. So that so like that they said the fields were totally destroyed. The loss of crops would make things more difficult, but they felt happy to be alive. So he said, of course, their fields were destroyed. So because the crops failed, because the crops were destroyed, I know they will suffer because they cannot get any money from that by selling the crops. They'll have to start all over again. But then they said, in spite of all this happening, they were happy because they were all still alive. They were safe because of a little yellow bird. So they're saying, just because of this little bird, they could, by its behavior itself, you could find that it alerted them, and they were all very safe. So these are the things that we can learn from little animals. Animals can teach us a lot of things. And the moral is, we should always try to be selfless in our actions. We should take care of others and try to help them whenever possible. So here it is, they're showing that we should also be like that bird who try to help them and help them in living their life and making them safe. We too should always be like that. Not to be selfish, we should try and do good things for others. Thank you. Now let us begin with grammar. Let me start with pronouns. When you talk about pronouns, pronoun is a word used instead of a noun. For example, Sundar is a clever boy. Sundar is my classmate. Here, Sundar is the noun. Instead of using again and again Sundar, we say, instead of Sundar is my classmate, we say he is my classmate. Now let me start with demonstrative pronoun. In demonstrative pronoun, you have words like this, these, those, and that. Now, this is used for a singular noun. These are used for plural nouns. And these things are used for things or objects that are close to you. Same thing, you have those and that. It is used in the plural or the singular form and for far away things. Now let us study about interrogative pronoun. In interrogative pronoun, you have words such as what, where, who, why. These words are supposed to ask questions. They are called as interrogative pronouns. Reflexive pronouns are nouns like words, itself, themself, ourself, yourself, herself. So it refers back to the subject. We have done the B part. In the C part, you have sentences. You have to complete the sentences according to the instructions that are given in the bracket. For example, the first one. This route is the shortest way to the hospital. They have asked for a demonstrative pronoun. A demonstrative pronoun I told you is this, that, those, or these. So the best word suited there is this. In the same way, you're supposed to complete the C part just the way I have shown you. Now let us start with homophones. Homophones are words that have the same sound but different spelling and different meaning. For example, sun and sun. Both of them have the same sound but the meaning is different. These are called as homophones.